So I understand I'm the only thing standing between you and booze. So this is not going to go long. I guarantee you that. Okay, 10 years ago, I'm in my office at the Second City. It's a Friday, late in the day. I'm finishing up work. My son, Nick, is upstairs. He is finishing his first week of improv camp, summer camps that we'd started. This is what you need to know about Nick. Nick was 8 at the time. He was a very chubby kid. He had weird theater parents, so he was a weird theater kid. And he got bullied at school a lot. But this week was amazing. He was happy every day. And we get into the car, and as we're leaving the garage of Piper's Alley at Second City, Nick says to me, "Dad, do you know what I love about Second City improv class?" And I said, "No, buddy, what do you love about improv class?" He said, "Because in improv, if you're nice and funny, you're popular." So I had that moment to get it together. And it got me thinking, that's the world I want to live in. That's a better world, where you're nice and funny and you're popular. So I got hired at Second City in 1988, and my first job was as a dishwasher, which is not as glamorous as it sounds. The back bar at Second City was filled with alcoholics, degenerates, sociopaths. You get the drift. The other guy who was hired that week to be a dishwasher was Jon Favreau, the director, and yeah. So, and we both had mullets, and there's photographic evidence of this. And while the dishwashing gig was pretty terrible, we did get to go out and watch the action on stage. And at that point on stage at Second City, Mike Myers, Bonnie Hunt, Jane Lynch, they were all in the professional company. Chris Farley had just got hired into the touring company and was constantly getting in trouble for breaking stuff. And it felt like magic to me. It just seemed like what they were doing on stage was utter magic. But you don't have to work at Second City long to figure out that it's not magic, it's actually a practice. So I'm not going to bury the lead here. Improvisation is yoga for your social skills. Okay? Improvisation is loud group mindfulness. Essentially, improvisation is practices for being a better human being. And so knowing that, it might not surprise you to know that the origin of Second City lay purely and factually in children's games. I don't know if you know the story, but a woman named Viola Spolin was working at Jane Addams' Hull House in the 1920s and 30s. And as a social worker, her job was to help assimilate the immigrant children under her care. So she came up with all these games, these theater games, these improv games that the kids could play together to teach them to be empathetic, to teach them to read the room, to teach them to collaborate. Many of the games were silent or in gibberish because the kids didn't always share language. So Viola had a son, and her son's name was Paul Sills, who was studying at the University of Chicago. And Paul loved watching the games. He found them very entertaining, and he loved playing the games. So he taught them to his friends at the University of Chicago, Mike Nichols and Elaine May, catching up with me. And they form the first improvisational theater in the country called the Compass Players. This is in 1955. By 1959, they open the Second City. It's a rather amazing story of how it went from children's games to Second City. All right, so let's flash forward. It's last year. I've just stepped down from running the Second City midlife crisis. Anyone? I'm in it. And I decide that I am going to start building all kinds of new stuff around improvisation. And I had an idea because I was reading books on negotiation. And almost all the top books on negotiation mention improvisation, but they don't go deep. So I Googled academic professors negotiation Chicago. And I started calling people who were on this list who looked interesting. This is how I do business. And I found myself at the Booth School at the University of Chicago with a professor named Eugene Caruso. And Eugene had said, I'm going to invite my wife, Heather, who also teaches here, because I think she's going to be interested in what you have to say. So I go into this meeting, and I'm fully expecting, like, I want to create like a class in negotiation, maybe turn into a book, who knows. And as I'm describing the improv roots and my thoughts on improvisation and the pedagogy and the methodology, Heather's face is lighting up. And what I don't know is that Heather works with Richard Thaler and runs the entire department there, behavioral science department, that's based around his book, Nudge. So I don't know if you guys have read this. It's a New York Times bestseller. Came out a few years ago. Thaler was also in The Big Short. He was with Selena Gomez describing the housing bubble crisis in the casino. Big Short directed by Adam McKay of Second City. fame. So essentially, Nudge talks about choice architecture. And what Heather was saying to me is, we have decades of research that human beings make bad choices for themselves. I don't know if you guys know anything about this. I mean, it's so fucking true. Right? I mean, it's just the most obvious thing in the world, and no one talks about it. And she's saying, it seems to me what you're saying is you have practices for people to model different choices, perchance better choices. And no one's put these things together. So I've spent the last year working with Richard Thaler and his department to tie together choice architecture and improvisation. And it's the work that we have been doing all along. It's just got some data and science with it, which makes it very attractive to a lot of people. But really, this is what Second City does when we go into businesses, is we make people model the behaviors and model the different choices. Because there's one thing to hear it, there's one thing to read the book, but when you have to do it, and it's so uncomfortable, I mean, it's the worst, and I'm sorry when we make you do it, but you feel so, it's like the same feeling you get after a great workout. And I always say people know they need to go to a gym to work out their muscles, but where do you go to work out your social skills? You know, how do you become a better listener? As I've been thinking about choice architecture and improvisation, and I've been on the speaker circuit, I was at a TEDx in Rochester, Minnesota, with my friend Neil Stevenson, who runs IDEO, the design firm here in Chicago. And Neil is searching for the roots of creativity. Where does creativity come from? And he thinks it might be in a space between consciousness and unconsciousness. So he tells this story about Thomas Edison, who also believed this. And Thomas Edison used to take naps during the day in a chair with spoons in his hand and a tin bucket below, so that when he fell asleep, he'd get jarred awake and then write down the thing that he was thinking at the moment. Neil suggests you don't try this because it's impossible to fall asleep with spoons in your hand in a chair. However, I was coming from, this is just last week, I taught at Stanford at the Graduate School of Business, a class in Jennifer Acker's Graduate School of Business class, and then I had to go to New York City to teach a workshop for Broadway producers. And as I was falling asleep before the workshop for the Broadway producers, these thoughts came to me, so I wrote them down. And this is them verbatim. It's on a shitty little piece of paper, so I'm not making this up. So I wrote, is it a leap to think that if we can adjust environments and behaviors in small but important ways, that we can make simple yet powerful changes? Can we, say, get poor people to vote so that we don't have to settle for candidates who are wealthy and powerful but are instead wise and resilient? Can we completely fund education and healthcare for everyone simply by taking the money spent by people fighting for and against gun control, reproductive rights, and tobacco, because with an educated and healthy populace, those are non-issues? Or, less grand, can we get people to stop being assholes at work? We're going to focus on that one. That's maybe doable. The other one's not so much, let's be honest. So essentially, I just want to do this. I want to talk about three elements of improvisation for you guys that you can get a little bit deeper into, and a few stories that go along with those. Because I think these are really core to getting people to behave better in general. And by the way, feel free to apply all of these to your parenting. Because that is what my wife and I are both been at Second City for about 30 years, and we do all the time, and it's very effective. So the first concept of improvisation, which is the title of my book, is called Yes and. That book was originally supposed to be called The Revolution Will Be Improvised, which while a very cool title, the salespeople are like, you have a sticky thing, it's called Yes and, let's go with that, and they were right. So what is the concept of Yes and? Improvisation is really, at its core, making something out of nothing, right? Which is something we all do every day. And yes and is a idea for the front end of that. So the idea here is when you are making something out of nothing with other people, the way to kill progress is by saying no. You can't start with no. And you also can't just start with yes. You have to say yes and. You have to affirm and contribute to explore and heighten. And I give these talks a lot, and there's always a guy in the back. He's on a suit usually. It's always a guy, a little older, He's got his arms crossed. And when he's asked a question, he goes, if I yes-anded every idea that came into my office, I wouldn't get any work done. So there's two things I know about that guy. He's a nightmare to work with. And two, he's missing the entire point. Because yes-and is about 5 or 10 minutes up front end of innovation. Allow weird ideas to exist. What's the big deal? And think about anything, any great innovation. The iPod was turned down for like 8 years. All the great inventions were wacky ideas. Let them live. And I can tell you this from working at Second City, because we develop our content this way. The absolute best material you see at Second City seemed insane when it came out of someone's mouth. All the time, all the time. So yes and is very powerful because not only, here's also the thing about yes and, is it makes saying no easier. Because once you have yes-anded everyone in the room and their ideas have at least been listened to and maybe played with, when they get killed off later, as they inevitably will, it's not a big deal. Because when you're saying no to an idea, you are actually saying no to a person. And that feels terrible. So many people, you guys all know who the no-but people are in your business, right? And they're the worst. And there are ways of getting them out of that, and they have to model the yes-and behavior. All right, quick story. Best yes-and moment of my life and my career was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So it was a night at Second City, and the concierge at the Four Seasons made reservations for a famous guest, but he didn't give us that person's name. Had they told us Renee Fleming was actually coming to the show, we would not have booked her into the show where we were illegally sampling her voice. Literally throughout the whole show. So Renee comes to the show, and at the end of the show, approaches our musical director who does all the sound, and he is sweating profusely at this point, completely freaked out. And she goes, don't worry, I'm not going to sue you. I have an idea. And Renee at that point had been hired as a consultant for the Lyric Opera Chicago, and her job was to innovate and to come up with new ideas. And Jesse, the musical director, gave her my card, and I met with her the next day. And who knew Renee Fleming is an incredible yes-and type improviser. And she's like, what could we do together? And it was so improbable, right? Because if you guys have been to Second City, 6 chairs, kind of it. And you go to opera, and there's like a goddamn elephant on stage. And like 200 people, we actually, because we did this project, so we would go to these operas, 200 people, you know, moving all around. I mean, just crazy. Scale is not the friend of comedy either, by the way. You know? Like when we go to these big rooms, it's really, really hard. But Renee wanted to know more about our process and about improvisation, about yes and I said, well, here's the deal. One of the things that we do is we go into cities and we create shows about that city. We'll have writers go in for a few weeks, do some research, we'll test out some material, and then open the show. And she said, what if you did that with the world of opera? So we started working on a show which we called the Second City Guide to the Opera. And we had one night to get it right, because it was a big gala performance. Renee had tapped her friend Patrick Stewart to be co-host, and it was a huge success. One of my favorite moments inside the show was the night before on Friday, we played on Saturday, is when Patrick and Renee showed up. So we only had a half a day or a day and a half to work them in. And we had a group, part of our cast were all people working with the Improvised Shakespeare Company, which improvises complete Shakespeare plays, and they're brilliant. And we wanted to do like an 8-minute Shakespeare piece inside the show. And we asked Patrick if he wanted to improvise with us. He had never improvised in his life. Not part of his training. And he watched them do it, and he said, you're mad, I'll do it. And that night, it was funny because we were actually given the instruction, when you pick the audience member, because we needed to kind of interview an audience member, just don't pick anyone in this one row. It's all sponsors, it's all people from the bank that funded this whole thing. Carissa, who's in our cast, heard that as pick someone in that row. So she got this guy from the bank, and this is pretty like knee deep in the financial crisis, and she's like, well, anything bad at work? He's like, no, everything's great. I mean, this guy was so tone deaf to what was going on in the world. And then we eviscerated him on stage for 8 minutes with Patrick Stewart improvising the Shakespeare piece, which just absolutely killed. And then afterwards, I was talking to Patrick, and he said, you know what was amazing about that is how scared I was. And I'm at a point in my career where I never get scared, and I want to feel that again. So what Patrick does, and this happens, is the Improvised Shakespeare Company plays all over the country. Every month, he goes and performs with them unbilled. And you can't take pictures, you got to put your phones away, and people just get to see this Shakespearean actor perform with these kids. It's really amazing. So yes and is a very powerful tool. The other aspect of improvisation I want to talk about is follow the follower. All right, and this is leadership. So I'm giving a workshop at the Spertus Institute, and we're teaching this game called Follow the Follower, which Spolin created. And the game is this. You have a group of about 10 people. One person is identified as the leader. Everyone has to silently mimic them because they're the leader. So you're walking around, and they're maybe gesturing like this. And then at some point, that leader has to give off leadership to someone else silently. Everyone has to pick up on it and change and follow the new person. So after the exercise, Hal Lewis, who runs Spertus, who has got a PhD in Jewish leadership, pulls me aside and he goes, "You're doing Peter Drucker." And I said, "Who's Peter Drucker?" And I did some research, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we don't believe in hierarchies at improvisation. He calls it flat organizational structures. Leadership operates in a dynamic, and this is something we keenly understand at Second City. And this is a problem in this country. And the problem is we always want a guy to solve it, or a girl to solve it, or a person to solve it. Like there's one magic creative. If it's in advertising, it's a creative director. If it's in politics, it's this like one leader. And that is such utter bullshit because it's all of us. It is all of us who are in this thing together. And Follow the Follower is about gaining the ability to not lose control as a leader, but to cede control. Take it back, give it away, give and take. You're facilitating control as an evolved leader. And this is not easy because none of our archetypes are built like this. Our stuff in television and books and also the way we were brought up in educational systems and certainly in business, where it's very top-down. Top-down does not work. It hasn't worked for ages. And what you need to do is empower the people around you to be leaders and not be fearful of that. One of my favorite moments at Second City just happened 3 years ago. We were hired by an advertising company to help them with a PSA for social anxiety. So I emailed Second City all the creatives who work at Second City to see if anyone on staff had experienced maybe a relative or a friend who had social anxiety. 70% of the people on stage at Second City suffer from social anxiety. I'm not exaggerating. I was shocked. I could not believe, because I'm like, why, if you have social anxiety, would you go on stage? Why would you become an actor, let alone an actor without a script? Just nuts, seemingly nuts. And Katie Rich, who now writes for Saturday Night Live, and she was then on stage at Second City, said, "Kelly, what you don't understand is when I'm improvising is the only time I'm not feeling anxious. Because I can't think about what came before. I can't think about what comes after. I have to stay completely in the moment. And the person I'm improvising with, their only job is to save me," which is completely true of improvisation. One of the rituals we have at improvisation at Second City is before we go on any gig, and this can be the Kennedy Center, or it could be if I had someone else that I was working with for this gig today, is before we go on stage, you say, "I've got your back," and you pet someone on the back. And it is amazing how that feels. And I've been doing this for 3 decades, and I did a workshop last week with a pair of people, the one with the Broadway producer, and I sort of forgot that was going to happen, and they did it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the best. But people don't do it. Follow the follower, hugely important. All right, the last principle I want to talk about is using failure. So here's another thing. You know, failure is so anathema to business, which is also ridiculous, because we fail constantly. We all know that. We all do in our lives. So this idea that we need to hide from failure or set up all these systems so that failure doesn't exist is just not living in reality. Look at it like a sport. Here's a sports metaphor. Okay, so you're in business. You go to your boss and you say, hey, I'm going to fail 60% of the time. Are you still going to be hired? Probably not. You say that to a baseball player says that to a manager, that he's going to hit that level. He's vying for a batting title. We all fail constantly. So at Second City, what we've done is recognize in improvisation that it's the fear of failure that screws up creativity, innovation, writing a good scene, making people laugh. That is completely how it doesn't work. So 80% of our job is killing fear in people, or more accurately, using fear. How do you use it to your advantage? So our model at Second City is a 2-act scripted review with a 3rd act that's improvised. And that 3rd act is really what I would call a failure module. So the 2-act scripted review that you come to, at the end of it, we actually take a bow, we indicate that the evening's over, and then we say, do you want to see a little bit more? Almost kind of apologizing as we say it. Because then we say, great, you can leave or you can stay, we're going to do this improv set. The improv set, it's late at night, it's free, the context has changed completely, in part because when we improvise purely, not scripted work, but improvised, a lot of it is going to fail, a lot of it. So you need to change the context. There's lots of books that talk about that failure's good, failure's something that you need to pay attention to, all true, but they don't give you practical guidelines in failure. We have them. You need to fail fast, you need to fail together, you got to fail with context, you got to fail with purpose. And there's more around that, but failure is absolutely essential to understand and use in the context of your day-to-day life. Use it all the time with my kids. If there's one thing, so I have a kid, Nick, who I talked about at the beginning, is going to college this year, and he's majoring in theater, going to Skidmore. And I think back to the thing that has been most successful for both my children, and that's giving them resilience. Letting them fall down, letting them model some failures, because then they know that they can pick themselves back up. Because I don't know about you guys, but my adult life has been getting knocked down over and over and over again, and I've got it easy. We have it easy. So if it's hard for us, which it is, think how hard it is for other people who don't have the same kind of advantages. I was giving that speech, that TEDx in Minnesota, and I said, I firmly believe this. I think that 95% of us sitting in this room think we're frauds. I mean, I do, and I have a body of work behind me that says otherwise. And by the way, the 5% who don't are like the worst people in the world. And one of them might be running for president. Or one, two. It's absolutely essential to lean into mistakes, to linger inside mistakes. That's where all the good stuff comes from. Innovation comes out of discomfort. And the great stuff always comes out of the failures. In manufacturing, they have rapid prototyping. Why would that not be important for ideas and actions? So what I suggest is that you find what your failure module is at work. Where can you fail fast and fail in context and fail with purpose? And fail together, hugely important. And there's different companies that have done this different ways. Basecamp is a company that puts on a yearly roast for all the terrible things that happened during the year. Failed pitches, failed products, and they celebrate how bad it is. We do it at Second City as a matter of business with our Second City holiday party. So every year at the holiday party, the night staff, so this is the bartenders and the hosts who serve the room, they put on a parody show. They parody the scenes that have been playing on stage during the year to basically satirize us, all the bosses. And one year, and this was like 8, 9 years ago, a bunch of the waitresses were doing a song talking about to our owner, who was sitting like right there, and said, "You can dress up a pair of jeans, why do we not have health insurance?" And the boss of all these people was like next to him, just like, oh no, this is the worst. The next day, Andrew called us into his office and said, how do we get them health insurance? And we got them health insurance. Yeah, and that's Andrew Alexander. That ain't me. But that's the ability to speak truth to power. And people don't speak truth to power. You have to set the stage for people speaking truth to power. You've got to give them an opportunity to take a chance, take a risk. I get being risk averse. There's times where you want to be risky and try stuff out. So give people a model. Give them a way to do it. All right, I haven't told you that. I'm going to tell you one more story and then I'm going to close. Okay, another sort of failure moment that I love. So Stephen Colbert was my wife's roommate at Northwestern. And she was working in the box office at Second City. This is in the very early 90s, late 80s. And Stephen was having a hard time paying rent because he was trying to pay, he was making futon frames in the basement, and they were terrible. They fell apart. He was not a craftsman. I think he wanted to be Jesus, so the whole carpenter thing might have been part of this. So she got him a job selling T-shirts at Second City to help pay the bills, but he could also take classes for free. So that's how he got involved. And then Stephen was in my first cast. In 1992, I became producer of the Second City. My very first cast includes Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, and Amy Sedaris. So not bad. Not bad at all. And my first hire in the touring company was Tina Fey. So we have a show called Are You Now or Have You Never Been Mellow? I can't believe I just remembered that, because so many show titles. And it's in the preview process where we're testing stuff out, our failure process. But this scene, which was called Spelling Bee, like kill city every night. And the Spelling Bee scene was essentially Colbert playing an evil spelling bee leader torturing these children. So there's the one kid who's clearly nervous and he keeps having him spell words like fear. He is a terrible human being. And the last girl was played by Jackie Hoffman, who's a Broadway actress, and she was playing Naomi Shapiro. And Colbert's his words for her were becoming increasingly anti-Semitic, until the final one was, your word is compass. And she says, can you use that in a sentence, please? He says, sure, your people killed Jesus, compass. Which is terrible and funny all at the same time. And as I say, this scene kills. So Stephen asks if he can come see me, and this is about midway through the process. And he's like, I want to pull the spelling bee scene. I'm like, why? It's the best scene in the show. He goes, I don't like the laughs it's getting. I said, it's getting huge laughs. And he goes, yeah, it's getting blood in the mouth laughs. They're laughing at her, not with her. So this led to a fairly significant conversation about the role of a satirist. And I talked to Stephen about Swift and about Randy Newman and Mark Twain, all different people who had used comedy and been misunderstood, and how maybe that's not his job to make sure that 100% of the people get it, because a lot of people do get it. I say this because how ironic that Stephen Colbert would take this what he conceived of as a failure, turn around in his mind, and